Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anne-Marie Butler. I'm the President of the Agricultural Science Association, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our ASA Insights webinar this morning. I'm here in Kilkenny. It's a beautiful morning, so I hope the weather is good where you are. No doubt you're eagerly watching events across the water with very much a keenly contested race, so thank you for taking the time to join us. The title of our seminar this morning is The Innovative Science of Grassland Management in a Changing Policy Environment. As many of you are aware, when I had the great honour of becoming ASA President, I identified a need to champion science in order to meet the challenges and embrace the opportunities within the industry. The ASA has science at its core. It's the bedrock upon which all of our members have developed their careers, and it's fundamental in enabling our industry to meet the challenges presented while simultaneously allowing us to achieve our ambitious growth targets. We're delighted this morning to have with us a very high calibre, prestigious panel, and I pose some questions to them, no doubt which will be answered across the morning. We're all very much aware of the competitive advantage which grassland offers our country and our industry. But I ask the question of how much of a competitive advantage do we have? What has science achieved for us in the last 10 years? And very importantly, what will science allow us to do in the next 10 years? The application of science at farm level is of crucial importance, and I'm delighted this morning that our session is chaired by a dairy farmer. We also pose the question, how will policy facilitate the uptake of science at farm level and allow our industry to prosper? As I said, we have a very strong calibre panellists this morning. I'm delighted to introduce you to those. Dr. Michael O'Donovan is the Head of Grassland Science Research in Teagasc Moorepark. Michael is well known to all of you, holds a Master's and PhD from UCD, and is both nationally and internationally known for his research work. A key focus of Michael's work is maintaining the competitiveness of Irish dairying using grass as the base feed. We're delighted also to welcome Dr. Elodie Ruelle, also a research officer in Teagasc Moorepark. Elodie completed her PhD in 2015, and her main research areas are modelling, grass growth, and animal intake. Elodie holds responsibility for running the grass growth prediction across the country, and many of us now will see that the results of this work are disseminated widely, including on the RTE weather update on Sundays. Our final speaker today is Jack Nolan. Jack, a BAG grad, again, no introduction needed, has responsibility at senior inspector level with the department for the Nitrates and Biodiversity Division. Jack leads on the strategic input to the development of sustainable agriculture and rural development through the implementation of legislation, particularly in relation to nitrates and environmental impact assessment. Jack is also responsible for the provision of specialist and technical expertise to effect the adoption of appropriate policy, legislation and programmes relating to science, water, biodiversity and air. And finally, our chair for today is Eddie O'Donnell. I'm delighted that Eddie was able to join us. Eddie, again, will need no introduction to many of you. A very progressive dairy farmer from Golden in Tipperary. Eddie was Young Farmer of the Year in 2006-2007, and more recently in 2017 was the Grassland Farmer of the Year. Eddie holds tremendous national and international experience, and I thank him for joining us. We very much thank you for joining us in such large numbers this morning. The Q&A function is available, so please do pose your questions right across the seminar, and we will have an open Q&A discussion at the end. But please do post your questions as we go. And at this point, I would like to welcome and hand over to Eddie O'Donnell and to thank everybody for joining us and enjoy the seminar.
Hi, Maria. Thanks for that. I suppose I'll just introduce, we're going to kick off fairly soon because we have 3 good speakers and we want to get the most we can out of them in the hour. So I'm going to introduce Michael O'Donovan to start off there. So Michael, you might commence and we'll work on from there.
Okay, Eddie. Thanks very much for the introduction, Anne-Marie, and it's a great honour to talk at the ASA. It's been a while since I spoke to the ASA. I think it was about 15 years ago. So the title of this talk this morning is Innovative Science of Grassland Management in a Changing Policy Environment. And much of the work that I'm going to show you this morning now has come from the work here from my colleagues here in Moorepark and in Athenry on the Solly area grasslands. So Irish grasslands, as we know, is characterised by high productivity, low variability of seasonal supply and quality. You know, home produced feed and sustainable production is are the key, I suppose, cornerstones of the Green Deal and the farm to fork strategy that has been recently But at farm level, there's inconsistent product prices and there's rising costs all the time through inputs and labour costs. And now in the last number of years, we have more environmental impacts. I won't call them constraints, but environmental impacts, and they're listed there on the bottom of the slide. And we have now a consumer awareness across the world, where our product and production systems are being questioned and identified. But system sustainability, and I suppose, where we move to in the future is really what we need to embrace now. And for us in Ireland, we know that home produced feed is really important. Improving grassland output and better tracking of grass supply are probably fundamentals for us to move forward with. And Elodie will deal with the tracking of grass supply in her discussion. For us, grass clover swards are going to be crucial for the future. Clover, I'll deal with this fairly extensively in this talk, is a plant that we have underused and probably haven't appreciated to date. Better nutrient use efficiency. We spoke about this last year at the open day, but it's probably more.
Michael, I stop you, Michael. There's no slides actually coming up for you. You're pretty on your first second one. There's no slides. You'll have to share them there with the group.
How was that?
Yeah, it's a lot better. Yeah. Thanks.
Sorry about that. I'll just go back to the start. Home produced feed and improved grassland output and better tracking of grass supply are crucial for us going forward. Grass clover swards, as I've said, have been underutilised across the country and are crucial for us from a nitrogen fixation perspective. Better nutrient use efficiency. We need to improve this. National Farm Survey showed what it was yesterday, but a lot of the better farms in the country have an in-use efficiency of beyond 30%. The new innovations, I suppose, like protected urea, LES, slurry spreading, better silage management are again, crucial to what we do. And in any, I suppose, grassland environment, we're talking about soil fertility improvement and the maintenance of that, of high levels of soil fertility. And I suppose system improvements, they need to come. It won't come from just one of these elements. It'll come from from them all. And I suppose this is what we're dealt with in Ireland, and we're lucky to have this. Is the grass supply curve from pasture base, and what we have is fairly consistent supply of grass. Albeit 2008 was very much I suppose a 1 in a 25-year occurrence regarding the the reduction of about 3 tonnes of grass dry matter, but I suppose what we need to adapt to, and Elodie is going to really deal with this, is how we can better manage grass, how we can better predict what's going to happen in the grass growth scenario. And when we look at our grass dry matter production figures, okay, 18 was pretty poor as regards cumulative dry matter production. The last 2 years, we're sitting on probably 2 years where we've 13 and a half tonne of grass dry matter produced across the farms that are, measuring pasture and putting into pasture base. So these are really respectable figures as regards grass dry matter production for the country. So I suppose for us, in a research perspective, where do we go forward with for the future? And about 8 years ago, we started work. I suppose we got really serious about white clover and researching it fairly extensively. And Deirdre Hennessy probably was the lead on this, followed by Mike Egan, Brian McCarthy then in Clonakilty. Philip Egan now has taken it on in the sheep perspective. And the reason we're interested in clover is a nitrogen source. It has environmental benefits if we can get high enough levels of it into the sward. Now, with under Jack's remit and the derogation, grass clover is part of farms that are in the derogation, and any reseeding that takes place, those reseeds must contain clover. For more work here, it's clear that you have to have a high level of clover to see dry matter production consistency and animal performance gains. And we've seen this quite repeatedly across the last number of years. And there is a huge gain here. About 70 million a year gain from having clover in the sward. But clover is not, and I continually have to kind of correct people, you just can't say because you put clover into a seed mix that you have clover in the sward. In fact, I suppose that's where this is kind of gone to ground in many ways across the country. For clover to work, you need high soil fertility, and you need high enough indexes of P and K for it to, especially K, for it to stay consistent in the sward. And we know out there, that there's been huge movement as regards moving soil fertility onwards, especially on dairy farms. Main grazing season is really important as regards how it's managed. Pre-grazing yields have to be within the remit of what we're talking about here, about 14 to 1600, and the residuals need to be consistent as well. High cuts of silage will probably lead to its elimination from the sward. And what we've seen here is the spring grazing targets are the same. Closing management is slightly different. The higher clover paddocks would be closed later. And if we just see the profile of clover content, how it moves in the sward, you see in spring, for us, it's at low. The two lines here are the clover contents from Clonakilty and Moorepark from the respective studies there. The spring rotation targets are very much the same. The targets that you're hitting in spring are as perennial ryegrass sward. Previously we would have said they were slightly different. It does need nitrogen early, and it needs slurry and no poaching. If you poach clover, you'll open up the sward and you'll lead to its elimination. As I said previously, the pre-grazing yields mid-season are important. Short pre-grazing, shorter rotation lengths, and manageable pre-grazing yields and residuals. And I suppose for us, the time to put clover into a sward is early in the season, whether it's reseeding or even oversowing. And then as we move through the autumn part of the year, the level of clover is increasing, upwards of the 30% of the sward. So you're trying to build rotation on the back of that, and again you're holding your residuals quite good. But like what we see as regards an animal performance perspective, from late April, early May, we're getting a drive up, and we're getting an increase in performance from grass clover swards. So I suppose what we're looking at here from the 7 to 8 years that we've completed this work, we're talking about a 7.5% increase in milled solids yield. Something similar as regards dry matter production, even with 150 kilos of nitrogen. From the Clonakilty work, the nitrogen level was the same. Milk production, I suppose, profile of those cows were slightly less than the Moorepark cows, but again, an 11% increase in milled solids. Herbage production from those years, 14 to 17, about 8% increase in production. So, clear and obvious gains where grazing management is high, where soil fertility is high, and there's a high level of clover in the sward. And in both those studies, you can see 23, 24% clover in the sward. And like Deirdre's work, when you put it all together here for the last 6 years, has shown really interesting scenario, where we compare grass only versus the grass white clover with about 23% clover in the sward at 150 kilos of nitrogen, same level of dry matter production, a bit more silage fed during rotation, during the lactation, milk yield, milk solids yield about 21 kilos of milk solids, concentrate the same. But the real thing for us, and like even in a grass only sward, 250 kilos of nitrogen, because the output from milk solids is high, and because the concentrate level is low going in use efficiency of about 40%, and up to about 60% with that grass white clover treatment. And the end surplus, again, 140 for the grass only, and about 63 for the grass clover. Like, these are really significant things, and if we can move this research out to the farm successfully, it can have major impacts. But and that is where you have to go to next, is moving clover onto farms, and we've started this about 4 years, 2016. Mike Egan started with a cohort of farms, and like, this is where the challenge is now. It's quite it's quite controlled to do work inside the Moorepark. Moving out to the farms is a bit more problematic. So like what we've seen, this is some of the farms, and you know, what we've seen is, I suppose, relative success over sowing clover in 1 year. So the clover was over sown in 2016, and what you're seeing is the residual effects of that over sowing in 17, 18, and 19. And what you're seeing here is the peak of clover on the best farms going to about 18%, and the lowest in in 19 at about 4%. So it's fair to say that we established clover successfully on about 60% of these farms. And that was purely by the oversowing technique, and that was oversowing in spring. And like there's multiple reasons for it not taking place, but I suppose for us to move this forward, what we're talking about here at farm level is, and at research level, and probably at industry level, is there's going to have to be a mindset change. It's not going to happen overnight, as you can see here. Soil fertility is a crucial thing that has to be improved on and maintained. Grazing management, you know, grazing management has to be better with clover type swards. You have to move mid-season to lower covers, and you know you have to hit residuals. If you don't do that, clover gets drowned out, and if you move to higher covers, it gets drowned out as well because of the fact that it needs light. Reseeding clover versus oversowing, we see the best outcome from straight reseeding of clover. Oversowing, you know, can be hit and miss, especially if you get later into the season. Oversowing, you begin to get very variable outcomes. It's probably a continual progress, and from we're seeing from Mike's work on the farms, very dense swards don't allow clover emergence, and I suppose now we have some spray chemistry issues with 2,4-D, now DB gone off the market, but hopefully we can get some stay of execution for that. So we're going to move this forward another bit in next year. We have about a third of the farms, there's about 30 farms to go on a clover pilot study. There's about a third of those farms have overseeded clover in this year and reseeded it in as well to some degree. And that's going to be followed on by Mike and his team in the next number of years. But crucial thing for us here is the better grassland farmers. You know, the likes of Eddie and his colleagues are now adopting this technology, and you know, I suppose we can say now that we're really serious about clover now. I've just added something on multi-species swards because there's a lot of talk about them at the moment, and much of the research that we've seen done on them has been undercutting with little to no undergrazing. And some of the recent meta-analysis has shown that there's a milk production response, about a kilo a day extra in milk. But there's actually, you know, I suppose the real reason we're looking at these species is what is their environmental impact. And that meta-analysis showed that there was no urinary nitrogen decline. The species we're looking at here, I suppose, and I suppose the real one from an in-leaching perspective would be plantain. And the New Zealand work would have shown that, you know, to get an in-leaching reduction, you're looking at about 30% of that of plantain to be in the sward, and at that level, you're talking probably about a compromisation of dry matter yield. And I suppose the issue that is there with these species is that their longevity is not extended. You know, plantain is about 2 to 3 year lifetime window. Chicory, more for a plant for more deeper rooting zones. It goes down into the lower horizons. It's a drought tolerant plant. Again, its longevity is 1 to 2 years. Red clover, I suppose more a conservation-based plant, has high nitrogen fixing ability, and it has low enough persistency under grazing. But our colleague, grass breeding colleague in Oak Park, Pat Conahan, has produced a variety called Ferga, which has come from some work Padraig O'Reilly did in Grange. Pat went in and he took out those plants, and he actually produced a red clover variety. Those plants were about 7 years old when Pat got hold of them. He produced a red clover variety from those plants, and you know, it has done quite well on the NIAB recommended list in the UK. So it's an option for us to put under conservation and grazing for 2021. But I suppose what I'm saying here really is there's longevity and persistency issues with these species. And if there is, you know, where their benefits, as stated, will not be materialized because, you know, they won't get down into those rooting zones. No, saying that, Curtins and Brendan Horn has a full farm system study with multi-species swards compared to clover, compared to grass only, in tow for 2021. we have these species above in some grazing plots, and we have PhD student Kieran Hearn looking at them at the moment, and we're 18 months into that work, and we have lysimeter work with plantain just started last week. So like our evidence at the moment is, we don't have evidence to recommend them, but I suppose we are researching. The next point here, I suppose, is nutrient use efficiency, and I suppose it's, again, it's like the third slide that I put up. It's not just one thing on its own. If you look at the dairy trends in soil pH, really positive story here from 2017, and I suppose this is just shows you how responsive farmers can be. If you look at that, I think it's 80% of the soils that analysed here have pH above 5.9, and 60% are above 6.2, which is a huge move forward from where we were. And I suppose we, at that levels, then you expect more soil mineralisation of nitrogen taking place. So again, a really positive story, and you'd be much more confident with clover getting into swards with that sort of a soil pH coming through. And again, I suppose technology of, trailing shoe technology, that Stan Lawler in a previous Teagasc life, and he's starting a new Teagasc life next month, has produced. And, we can see here that this is, technology that's going to be taken on board. And, the nutrient availability of slurry coming from trailing shoe is higher than splash bed slurry. And we're going to see this being adopted at farm level, and you would say per se, this will lead to a reduction in chemical nitrogen taking place when we have better use of slurry. And like there is trailing shoe used in spring has huge advantages as regards what it can do as from a nitrogen source. And then the use of protected urea. Guys in Johnstown have done work on this previously and have looked at and they have put it into the ammonia MAC the overall MAC curve. We took it on board from the perspective of looking at it under grazing, and Anya Murray and Brian McCarthy have done 2 years work, and this is the most up-to-date work just analysed last week, or just analysed last Tuesday, and then you're seeing it for the first time now. The first audience to see it. I suppose the crucial role at farm level was those NBT treated urea hasn't got the same agronomic performance, and under grazing in the 2 sites that we've looked at, it has. So that gives from the environmental benefits, they are clear to be seen from an ammonia perspective and a greenhouse gas perspective. So we're very confident with this product going forward for the adoption at farm level. So I suppose I've put nutrient use management on 6 things: P&K for grazing, P&K for silage, LES, slurry usage, sulfur within the system, using early nitrogen strategically, and a simple plan. And really, we're going to see a lot more of nutrient management planning taking place. It's going to be probably one of the key things that has to happen at farm level. I'm not saying it doesn't happen on some farms, but it probably doesn't happen as widespread as it should. And the priorities here are, within key periods: nitrogen sulfur balance, early P. It has to be a good fit for the average situation in the grazing block. It has to be, nutrient balance has to be, as uniform as possible across the farm. Simple to follow. And like what we see here is, you don't ignore adjustments when they have to be made. And like what we say, I suppose, at farm level now, especially where you're getting high levels of dry matter production, you're seeing some K deficiency coming in, and those things have to be sorted out early enough in the system to keep the levels of production at the levels that's required. So I suppose where can we go to from where we are? And my colleagues in the National Farm Survey produced this data, yesterday and in previous years. But I suppose at the bottom of this is probably the most important part. You're looking at nutrient use efficiency on National Farm Survey farms is about 24%. That dropped in 18 slightly because of the drought. But we see that there's crucial things that you can move forward here. There's concentrate usage that can come down. It can be used a lot more strategically during the season. Clover can be used. If you look at that nitrogen level, it probably hasn't moved since 2013 up to last year. So there's plenty of things that I've said in the last time. If we can get clover integrated into the system, we can get reductions in nitrogen, And that you know, that's something that has to be an objective for us going forward. So I suppose for us, for the delivery for the industry, you know, we're grass based here. We probably have the most productive grassland in Europe, and we are quite different from that. You know, our reseeding is grassland to grassland base. There's little else taking place. You know, there's little grassland going back to tillage or tillage coming into grassland. Our inputs are reasonably low when you look at the French and the Dutch systems. We have targeted grassland projects. Grass 10 has been hugely successful. PBI and Elodie's moist grass growth model are moving, and the Signpost Farms, which is a new initiative starting next year, you know, is going to embrace the technologies I spoke about even further. And like, we have responsive farmers, and all you have to do is come down to a Moorepark Open Day, and you can see how farmers engage with the researchers here and the advisors in the villages. You know, they're technology driven, and they want to maintain their competitive advantage. So for us, the focus has to be on the fundamentals, and that is the grazing season, spring, mid-season, and autumn. And in the autumn, we can do a lot more. You know, if you looked at the pasture-based newsletter, only 10% of guys were hitting their autumn targets this year, and that was 18% last year. We know from Grass 10 that most farms can get 2 to 3 more extra grazings, and that's purely by grazing management inside farm gate. You know, we want more measurement. The moist model will lead to more prediction. We want to balance supply, and we want to, I suppose, improve soil mineralization, and we get that with higher pH. Nutrient management, we'll have a live system, a better system probably in pasture base in the new year. We're looking at probably more soil fertility assessments, integration of clover, better slurry usage, and improved sward management with clover. And I suppose we're probably going to see a change in improved input management systems. Probably want to see more assessment of slurry nutrients, assessment of, you know, and use of lower crude protein concentrate, and I would see grass quality measurement being you know, a lot more widespread used in the future. So I'll leave it there for the moment. We'll take any questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Michael. Just a quick question while Elodie is setting up her slides there. We might keep it moving, Elodie. So you're saying 70 million euros per year, Michael, is available to the Irish dairy industry or beef industry across the country. So you're saying it can be a bit tricky to get it on, and reseeding is the best way to get it into the sward. But if it's not possible to reseeding, you've got a bit of work done on getting it into oversown it into pasture anyway, don't you?
We do, yeah, and like we started here, in the, you know, I suppose the one I've listed there in the points on the on-farm clover sward there. One of the crucial things for us is that the soil fertility is good, and like there needs to be a bit more work on oversowing. But even from the work we did here this year in Moorepark with Mike Egan, the timing of oversowing is really important. We've got a much better response to oversowing early in the season than in the mid-season period. So, you know, I'm not saying that we know all the answers to oversowing, Eddie, but like we're a lot better positioned to about it now than we were previously.
Yeah, because if we're trying to hit the targets, there'd have to be a mixture of reseed and oversown to get it in anyway, won't it?
Yes.
I might move straight on to you, Elodie, and because the time is moving along nicely. Thanks, Elodie.
Okay. So, hi everyone, my name is Elodie Ruelle, and I'm here to talk to you about grass growth prediction. So I guess the first question you may have is, why do we care, or why do we want to do grass growth prediction? Well, that's because, so at the minute, every tool like Pasture-Based Ireland, well, most of the tools anyway, are working on historical data. When you enter your cover and look at your wage, it's what's happening now, it's today. But we need to stop looking about today and start to look about tomorrow, plan for tomorrow. You want to change, you can't change what has happened already, so you need to try to change what's going to happen next week. So what's going to impact your prediction or even for grass growth? But as you all know, obviously weather forecast is very important to be able to do prediction, but that's the first almost limitation, is that good weather information are there around 7 days, so we won't really be able to do grass growth prediction for more than 7 days because of this. Then obviously soil type and soil fertility. So we need to have information about fertilization, how much nitrogen has been applied on paddock, otherwise there's no way we could do grass growth prediction. And then grass management also. So every farm cover is very important to be able to do prediction. then one with a paddock grazed. So obviously you can think, yeah, the cows are on a paddock, so there's grass disappearing, but it's also very, very important for because of urine and feces patches, because that's bringing back nitrogen into the soil. So that's very important to be able to predict grass growth, and information about cutting too. The model I'm going to present to you now, and the one we are using, is the most grass growth model. It has been developed here in Moorepark, and the ST of the model, the Saint-Gilles part, is because it has been developed with INRAE, which is the equivalent of Teagasc in France. So what we want to do when we develop that model was to develop a user-friendly grass growth model, which predicts grass growth, so that's the quantity of grass nitrogen content, so that's the quality of the grass, and the nitrogen leaching, so that's the impact on the environment also. And we'll say the grass growth part is very robust now, and the two other parts still need some work. When I say user-friendly, it's because there's actually a lot of grass growth models which exist out there, but most of them are just going to be useful for research. There is no way you could actually use them on farm or directly on farm. So that's what we wanted, is really have a model which was useful for the farmers and not just for us researchers. So I'm going to present you how the model is working very simply there. So what do you need to be able to do the grass growth prediction? As I said, you need weather, so rainfall, temperature, and solar radiation. What you need also is some information about the biomass on your paddock. So how much grass you have today is very important to know to be able to predict how much grass you're going to have in 7 days. Then some other information about the soil. I won't go too much into detail for that, and some of information about management. How is the model working then? Everything starts with a potential growth. The potential growth depends on the biomass of your paddock on a day. So the more biomass you already have on your paddock, the more potentially your grass can grow. And it depends also on your solar radiation. So the more sun you have in a day, the more potentially your grass can grow. Then that potential growth is reduced into growth, and that's reduced depending on the temperature. If it's either too cold or too warm, obviously your growth is going to reduce. It's going to depend on the water you have in your soil. So if you don't have enough water, obviously, if you're in a drought, it's not good. Even though all the other conditions are nice, you're still not going to have any growth. And it depends on the mineral nitrogen you have in your soil. That growth the growth on the day become more green biomass in your paddock, but some of that green biomass will die, but still stay on the grass. That's your dead biomass. And then some of that dead biomass will actually fall back into the ground, and that will increase your organic nitrogen pool, because in the soil you have two nitrogen pools, which are the mineral nitrogen pool and the organic nitrogen pool, and those two are interacting with what Michael has spoke about, which is mineralization and immobilization, and that's a fairly important thing. Then rainfall interacts with the water pool in your soil, and then you have the water in your soil and the mineral nitrogen. If you have too much water in your soil, then you have some nitrogen leaching, which is what we want to avoid as much as possible. Then the animal also is interacting, as I said, because if you have grazing animal on your paddock, then there's going to be urine and feces patches, and that's going to increase your mineral nitrogen and organic nitrogen of your soil. That's some of the very simple output of the model, some very simple simulation I have done. So you have 2017 in pink and 2018 in blue. You can see, and two types of soil, the free draining soil is on top and the heavy soil is in the bottom. So you can see, as you have all known, that 2018 was a fairly bad year with a very poor spring and drought in the summer. And you can see the difference between soil type, because so the heavy soil had a drought also, but which did not last as long as the free draining soil. You can add more years, so you have added 2016 there, or you can actually add all the years. When you do that, it's a bit, when you do that, you can see that the heavy soil in the spring, most of the time, take way more time than the free draining soil to actually start growing. But, and what you need to remember also is we're just speaking about grass growth. So it's not because you have grass on your farm that you actually can utilize it well, especially with the heavy soil. Your paddock could be too wet and you could possibly not graze that grass. So what are we doing now? What I am doing and how am I doing grass growth prediction? What information do I need to be able to do the grass growth prediction? Firstly, the very good news is virtually all the information I need are almost all into pasture-based Ireland. So I need information about all the paddock in the farms, that's in pasture-based. When was the paddock grazed or cut, which days, that's in pasture-based. How many cows was in the paddock, that's also in pasture-based. Then I need information about covers, like what's the biomass on the paddock on the day, that's in pasture-based as soon as anyone do a cover. And then I need the information about fertilizer application. So when was fertilizer applied and how much, and technically that can be in pasture-based too. So everything I really need is in pasture-based. The only other information I need are information about weather, historical weather, because I need to know how much it rained for the last few weeks to be able to predict drought, but obviously forecast weather. And all that is provided by Meteran to us. Just very quickly, that's the number of grass cover which has been recorded on pasture-based Ireland, weekly grass cover for 2019 and 2020. You can see there's more and more recorded there, and that's kind of following the shape of the grass growth. And that's important, those numbers are important because basically that's almost the number of grass growth prediction I could do weekly if those information are put in. So the map on the right here is showing you the grass growth prediction I am doing weekly. So we are doing that weekly on 55 farms at the minute across the country. Like each number that you're seeing here corresponds to one grass growth prediction specific to a farm, and the farm is located where you can see the different dots. So you can see we have fairly good coverage of the country, even though we need a bit more in the west. You can ask for fertilizer information. It's just because it's easier to ask people to keep doing what they are doing than asking them to do more things. Who have access to those data then? So the farmer is getting the data from the map I just show you each Tuesday through WhatsApp, but other people have access to that. Any Teagasc advisor can have access to it, and some government body has access to it too. Who are we sending that? So as I say, WhatsApp for the farmer, advisor are getting that by emails with other information, such as, so on the left is the grass growth prediction, on the middle is the soil temperature average for the next 7 days, and on the right, it's the rainfall data predicted by Meteran for the next 7 days. So that gives them extra information to be able to advise farmer. Then it's also presented in the Grassland newsletter, a bit in the different formats. So on the right is the grass growth predictions that we have averaged by county. Yeah, so that we have averaged by county. And on the left, it's actually just the previous week grass growth recorded from pasture-based Ireland. And then lastly, since August, the grass growth predictions are actually presented each Sunday on the farmer forecast on RTE1. Now, what are the farmers thinking about it, or are they actually interested? So what we can see is, so in 2019, we did a survey. There was 45 farmers which had access to the grass growth prediction at the time. They ranked the model usefulness at 4 out of 5 and the model accuracy from 3.7 out of 5. But even more importantly, I would say 80% of them changed their management due to the prediction. So that could give them more confidence in terms of should I close or not close a paddock, or information like that. Now, did it work? Because that's important too, obviously. Is it accurate? Does it work? So in the black, the plain line is what was recorded for, once again, 2019. For the 45 farms at the time, and that the plain line is what was recorded into pasture base in average for all those farms, and the dotted line, the brown line, is what we sent, the value we sent to the farmer. So you can see that overall it's following the shape fairly well. There's some small overestimation, but we're happy enough. Another information I'm adding there, it's in green, the new curve is what we would have sent if we had the actual weather instead of forecasted weather. And there you can see that some of the overestimation actually become good data and not overestimated anymore. So that's fairly important point. If we look at farm-to-farm data now, well, farm prediction data, in gray is what was predicted by the most model, in red was what was into pasture base. And each dot you can see, each small dot corresponds to one cover entered by the farmer. So that's what I can compare to. So obviously that's one of the best farms. That was 2019 again. Another very good farm, farm very well predicted by the model with a small, where I could see the small drought between day 230, we'll say. And now I'm gonna show you some farms which don't know as well, who don't work as well, and I'm gonna explain why, some of the reason. So first of all, sometimes once again, the red is what has been entered by the farmer. So obviously you see those kind of big peak. It's probably some mistake in the record. I don't think those peak did exist. So I wouldn't be too afraid about that on the performance of the model for those specific points. Then there you can see there's way less dots than for the two first farms. And what happened there is the farmer is doing less cover. And that just shows that the more information you're putting into the model, the more accurate it's going to be. So the more cover you can do is always the best, even for model prediction. And then that the more worrying one is wrong historical weather information. So once again, most simulation in gray, in red is the model. No, in red is pasture-based data, and you can see that the model is always a small bit overestimating during the full end of spring, summer. And when I told you that Meteran is sending me historical information, obviously they do not have weather station in all the farms. So it's some kind of modeled historical information. And what we could see there was actually the rainfall was overestimated in the data I was getting. So it's actually Curtin Farm, which is 3 kilometers from where I am now. And so they did get way less rain than what was in the data. So that means they were in a small bit of a drought for the full summer, but the model couldn't know that because the data I was putting in was wrong. So that's why that we're in the process of putting 30 weather stations in some of those 55 farms this year. Why are we doing that? Like that, I will know for sure that if the model is wrong, it's not because my historical weather data are wrong, but that's because there is something wrong with the model, and that's fairly important for model evaluation and model improvement. What are those weather station measuring? They are measuring wind, rainfall, temperature, solar radiation, soil moisture, and soil temperature. Where do we want to improve the model specifically? So weather, as I just said there, we want to incorporate soil fertility a small bit more, because for the moment, the model is just working with nitrogen and we don't have other import. It just assumes that everything else is perfect, which is obviously not the case, sadly, in every farm. We want to improve a bit the environmental impact that we could predict with the model. And as Michael was saying, we're speaking a lot about clover now. We want to put clover on farm, so we need the model to be able to predict clover growth also, and not just grass in itself. In conclusion, I think what's very important is we need to change our thinking about grass growth. The grass growth you're getting at the minute into pasture base was last week grass growth. It's not because the next week one could be totally different to what it was last week. So we need to start thinking about next week grass growth. The most model is accurate enough, we're happy with it, and it can improve and help farm management. And it does help you he can help you to better anticipate the next 10 days, weeks grass supply. In the future, we want to keep doing what we're doing now, but adding more farm, especially in the West, that we will predict grass growth on. And at the end point, or very important point, will be to incorporate the most model into pasture base, like that any farmer which do enter enough data into pasture base will be able to have his own grass growth predicted for his own farm, depending on his management and his weather. And that's all for me.
Thank you, Elodie. We might move straight on to Jack, if that's okay, Jack, because time is shoving on. Elodie, just a quick question when you're talking there, or from your presentation. This is going to be very beneficial to the Irish farmers, and I'm one of the farmers, so I know it's accurate, like, and it works well. So, but it's going to save farmers a lot of headaches and do a lot from down along the road. So I think the Irish dairy industry or beef industry has a good bit to be thankful for this project that's undergone. So Jack, I might hand over straight over to you, so please.
That's grand, Eddie. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you might share the screen, Jack, will you, please?
I have it shared there. Maybe Elodie, if she stops sharing hers, maybe mine will come up with it.
I'm not sharing anymore, so you can.
Okay.
I think.
It says you cannot share screen while the other participant is share. Okay. Is it up there now?
Yeah, it's coming now. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Jack.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And again, like Michael said, I'd like to say thanks very much for the invitation here today. So I'm going to give you the department's perspective on what's going to happen over the next few years, where we're at the minute. I only have 10 slides, so we're not going to take too long. The first thing I'd like to say is Ireland has a good story, and when I saw this slide, there's a couple of ways of interpreting it. If you're positive, you say we have a good story, and if you look at it another way, you say we're telling a bit of a story about the environment here. So we're in the top 5 or definitely top 10 as regards European water quality. But for the last number of years, it's been sliding. We have about 600,000 kilometres of hedgerow according to the EPA, which is excellent when you fly over Denmark or Holland. The comparison to flying into Cork, Limerick or Dublin, you know, the amount of biodiversity that's out there. But unfortunately, we need to improve the quality of it and we need to mind it better. Greenhouse gases, everybody knows the conversation around it. We need to start thinking about landscape management. There was an excellent article there last week in the Farmers Journal from Anfora Ishka, just talking about this whole idea of catchment or landscape management. So it's not just about one farmer managing and improving nitrogen efficiency, which is so important, as Michael and Elodie said there, but it's about all farmers coming together to make a change. There was a very good programme there last week. Harold was on it, Harold Kingston. I don't know if he's there today, on Ear to the Ground, talking about water quality, and it's a community effort. And that's really important. It's a national effort all around the environment. Like, farmers are a huge part. 2/3 of the land area of Ireland is taken up with agriculture. And everything that farmers do on land has a huge impact. And that has to be supported by industry, by the consumer and the price of food. But farmers primarily have to start making changes on the farm. Every 4 years, the EPA published the State of the Environment report. And all of these things that you see here, there are 7 big ticket items, and they're all involved in agriculture as far as I'm concerned. Because the first thing you look at there on the right-hand corner, sustainable economic activities. We want farmers to be able to make a living on the land, but not at the cost of the environment. The two have to work together. So if we're doing something and we are, like, using too much nitrogen on the farm, we have to change that practice. So within the next year, the nitrates regulation is going to be reviewed. And one of the things coming in that, guaranteed, is a reduction in the amount of nitrogen allowed on Irish farms. So what are we going to do about that? How are we going to cope with it? For community engagement there, we need farmers to engage, and advisors and researchers. And across government, we need a coherent approach across government and across the whole sector, and that includes industry. And that's difficult, because if you're listening today and you're going out to sell fertiliser to someone tomorrow, are you remembering what I said today about water quality, or are you trying to hit a quote and a target and work on commission, which is fair enough? But we have to work with farmers, because the things that Michael said there around liming, soil fertility, clover, these are all given benefits. But we've been talking about these now for a number of years. And now we're going to take action. The department are going to take action and say, look, fertiliser use is going to be reduced. It's there in the Farm to Fork strategy that you're all familiar with. By 2030, it has to be reduced by 20%. And we're in a good place compared to our European neighbours, that we have the capacity to reduce and still produce. A key point on this slide that I'd just like to draw you to is the environment and health and well-being. And that starts off with the farmer themselves. Farmers have a very poor record for health and safety, but also for their own mental well-being, for their physical well-being. And if you don't get that right, we're never going to change the environment. You won't grow grass, you won't make money. You have to look after yourself first. We don't do enough about our soil in Ireland. We moved away, thank God there's a move back towards looking more into it, but we have huge issues here around suboptimum soil pH, a loss of carbon in organic soils, and we're not realising the sequestration potential that we have there. There are major pressures. Obviously, agriculture does a huge amount of good that should be recognised and should be acknowledged. A problem is that we don't have baseline figures for exactly what's in the soil, what's in the hedgerow. Because if we did, then we could go to industry and say, well, you should pay more to this farmer for doing more for the environment. Or through CAP, they should be rewarded. The pressures are coming on soil from fertiliser use, livestock, and so on. And we look to soil to filter water, to grow a crop, to sequester carbon. You know, there's a huge amount going on there, and yet people don't pay enough attention to it. We've seen massive regional intensification over the past couple of years, so much so that now 1/3 or about 10% of the farms in Ireland have 1/3 of the bovine livestock. And they've mainly moved to the south and southeast where you get the freer draining soils. And these orange catchments here have problem with nitrogen losses that are increasing. And then if we went to the west of the country, we have problems with phosphorus. So it's not like we're blaming or any particular cohort of farmers are being singled out. There's work to be done on every single farm. Every single farm has work to do around soil fertility, around reducing fertilizer use, about putting in place measures that will let them grow the grass that they need to make money, but also around planning about the type of grass or how much grass they're growing and what time of the year. At the moment, if I went on Dundee, I could buy bales of silage for 15 to 20 euro down the road here. And that doesn't make economic sense because the amount of nitrogen that went out to grow it and the phosphorus and potassium that's been pulled out of the soil, and you're only barely being paid or not even being paid for the silage. So are we growing the grass at the right time of year? And the model that Elodie is talking about there is so important, and people tailoring the fertilizer use according to it. And how do we put the science into practice? Well, we had a derogation review in 2019 and 2020, and we took on board what's coming from Moorepark and other Teagasc research around the country. Compulsory lime use on intensive farms, compulsory use of low emission equipment, bringing in measures around biodiversity. But key to all of this is talking to farmers and explaining to farmers why we're doing it and listening to farmers about the soils that are there. Because what we're seeing more and more is that this idea of a blanket regulation across the country doesn't work. It'll bring us so far, but every farmer knows the fields that are more vulnerable to nutrient loss or that they can't graze early or late. Measuring grass was brought in because the department agrees and supports Teagasc on the science of measuring grass. Measuring grass is compulsory. Sometimes people think about intensive farms purely as derogation farms. There's another 5,000 farms there exporting slurry to come under the derogation. And they're going to have measures similar to derogation from next year on. And in the future, it's likely that more and more will have to be done by these farmers. So they'll have to take on more measures because they are the high users of fertilizer. And there's more to be gained from getting a farmer stocked at 180 or even at 150 to use low emission equipment than there is from somebody stocked, say, at 80 or 90 kilos per hectare. We have to do more around biodiversity. 50% of global GDP comes back to biodiversity. That's 40 trillion euro. It's almost an unimaginable sum. But the whole thing is there around natural capital. Putting a value on the hedgerow there in the top corner, that acts as a disease barrier. There's pollinators in it. It's a windbreak. It's protecting animal health. And it's excellent for biodiversity. Like when the Dole declared the climate crisis, they declared a biodiversity crisis as well. And it's going to get a much greater focus. And again, what we need to do is establish the habitat areas on farms so that we know exactly what's there and then pay farmers to do more. But there are simple steps that farmers can take straight away that make a big difference, like things from the pollinator plan, like rotational cutting of hedgerows, or lifting the flail on the moor, or lifting the flail on the hedgerow, and when you're cutting the ditches, up 2 or 3 foot, to let the plants grow a little bit longer. Not cut in September, but wait until October, November, or later again in the year. There's a new structure coming through CAP. CAP makes up about 20% of a dairy farmer's income. From the Teagasc survey, it now makes up about 130% of a beef farmer's income. And on the right-hand side, you can see everybody is going to be asked to do more. Not just dairy farmers or beef farmers, every farmer. So there's more, strengthened conditionality means that cross-compliance requirements will be increased. And for the first time ever, money from Pillar 1, which is direct income support, will go towards environmental schemes. And farmers, if they want to maintain the direct payment of what it is today, it's not index linked, it's going down due to convergence anyway, but if they want to get back some of that money that's going to be taken in, they'll have to engage in eco schemes. And the plan is that these will be open to all. Everybody will be able to engage with them. They can do things within a year that will have a value, and the department will be able to pay them. So they'll have to be simple, they'll have to be understandable, but they will also have to show results. That's a big difference in this CAP. It's results-based. So the Commission want to see what's your water quality there, what are you doing about it, show us the results of the measures. The same thing around biodiversity and climate. If we looked at it in another way, animal numbers have gone up hugely. Are they going to continue going up? Fertilizer sales and trends have settled down a little bit, but that's on a national basis. If you look at where the stock are now, they're in the south and southeast of the country. There's more cows in Cork now than there are in the north of Ireland. So obviously there's more fertilizer being used there, and this localized use, high use, is putting pressure on it, depending on the soil type. And the one at the bottom there, the social license. Like, farmers are more and more in the spotlight, and often very unfairly. There needs to be a coming together whereby people that are saying we need to stop farming need to look at the real world, the economic consequences of what they're saying, look at bringing in food from the Amazon, from California and so on. That's not sustainable either. But farmers need to come to the table and say, yeah, we accept this. We have been using too much fertilizer. We can use the low emission. We can get the clover onto the land quicker, because all the measures Michael are talking about, they're all very, very doable, and it's just the speed of getting them onto farms. This has to happen very, very quickly, because we have to be in a position where we're going to show that we're making meaningful change. We have to convince not just ourselves, our colleagues in other departments, and the general public. We're exporting over 14 billion worth of food each year. We have to convince the consumers that are purchasing our food that we're doing everything we can for the environment. Thank you very much. That's me, Elodie.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks a million. I'll just remind participants that have joined us for the last hour, the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you want to ask a question, if you hit on that and type it in, we'll keep an eye on it and we'll ask the questions to the speakers. Just to get the ball rolling on you, Jack, you weren't, you didn't hold back, and you, as you said to us, you wouldn't either. I think it's very beneficial to get someone from the department on the seminar that you can actually see what we are thinking. So I suppose the question to you all then, is it possible to be that the country, or farmers in the country, will be still able to grow 15 tonnes of grass diameter per hectare on a reduced nitrogen scenario? Is that possible? I might ask it to Michael and to you, Jack, or what do you think will have to be put in place, or can you put a percentage on what you think the nitrogen will be reducing over the next few years, if you think?
To me, it's going to start with a bag. I think every farmer should be looking at reducing by a bag of can next spring, next year, like over the year. Save 2 or 3 units per round. I think it's a realistic target. I think if you manage your grass, measure it, use the growth prediction model, get your soil fertility right, and think about what you're doing, and start there. But the target in the farm to fork is 20%, that we're going to reduce by 20%. I'm not sure if that'll be enough or not, and it'll depend on soil type. And the 15 tonnes per hectare, I suppose we need to remember, not every farmer is growing that, and not every farmer needs to grow it. The disaster from a department point of view would be that we don't grow enough fodder. Like, we've had 2 fodder crises in the past 7 years. We don't want to go down that road, but there's definitely savings to be made. And if people don't remember anything else I said today, keep in your mind, reduce by at least a bag of can in 2021.
So Michael, for you to come in there now and back up Jack as regards nitrogen is going to be reduced, and it's going to happen, that's it. So you feel clover can fulfill that, and what is the best method of oversowing if you can't reseed in clover to get it on the ground quickly, as Jack is stating there?
Yeah, so like I think we can get clover on the farms if we're strategic about it. And, you know, Jack is talking about reducing nitrogen. And you know, that's going to be a hard pill to take for probably a lot of the industry. Where we can see nitrogen being I suppose better used on farms is better use of slurry. So, and there's a lot of work, existing work, and it's in one of the slides that I showed you there on I suppose the you know, the advantage of using LES slurry over band spread slurry. And like, there's nearly 4 units there on 100,000 gallons. So like, straight away there, Eddie, you're talking about, you know, using slurry better and, you know, on the paddocks that need it. So, right, okay, that's one thing that has to be stressed, and there has to be a strong strategy around that. As regards clover and oversowing clover, like, definitely we would say that, you know, oversowing clover with a gutter machine or an iron box, something like that, we would see that, you know, where you're getting side seal contact and getting good management after that early in the season. And what I talk about early in the season is April, early May, that timeline. That seems to be when, you know, you can get control of rotations mid-season, and the clover can get time to establish. We haven't seen we've seen, I suppose, poor results when you go later in the season with oversowing. So I suppose, and like, you know, we're talking to, you know, if you look at the soil fertility and the lime usage that's taking place on farms, and like Jack, that is a huge positive that has taken place, and you know, I'm sure that they haven't acknowledged that, you know, firmly, but like, and like that's going to help the scenario as regards, you know, getting clover established. But I don't agree with some people saying, you know, you can put in clover and take down nitrogen. There's a fair amount of adjusting and grazing management for that to take place, as you well know, Eddie. You know, it's just not one recipe that you just take in one thing, take out another. There's a fair amount of moving, and people move strategies, and they have to get used to that. And you know, you'd say that you know, you have to go and see these guys that have, you know, that have got good clover and good persistent clover on their farms, to know how to do it, or to get to know how to do it.
So a quick question for you, Jack, there that has come in. Could Jack explain the comment that 50% of the global GDP is linked to biodiversity? And why are we seeing biodiversity being such a challenge when we have so many hedgerows and field margins with little change over the last 30 years?
The figures there come from the Farm to Fork, Eddie, and are based on the fact that, say, the pollination of crops and so on, and the filtration, like a third of, you see, sometimes people think, okay, biodiversity, that's the hedgerow. A third of the biodiversity on Earth is in the soil. And look at the value of the soil, you know. So I can send that on, whoever the questioner is, I can get it and send it on. And why are we seeing so much? It's the quality of the hedgerows. The quality of the hedgerows that we have there. Like, we have 600,000 kilometres of hedgerows. But at certain times of the year, like the council have things there at the moment about telling people to cut the hedges. But every March or May or whenever the hedge cutting season comes in there, or sorry, September, some people are anxious to get out and turn them into little boxes with nothing more than grass on the ditch. And I don't think that's what people want. I don't think that's what we need. But it's a very easy for someone passing by to take a photo on their phone and put it up on Twitter. And it gets an awful lot of criticism. And we need to encourage small areas. For example, there's problems in CAP with the eligible hectare. Areas that are eligible for biodiversity, areas that are good for biodiversity should still be eligible for basic payment. But there has been destruction of habitats on farms throughout Ireland over the last number of years. We've been very good at planting hedgerows under environmental schemes, but not so good at getting farmers to improve the quality of the existing stock on farms.
Another question for you there, Jack. Do you think the derogation limit of 250 will reduce in the near future? And the second question, more intensive dairy farmers will be forced possibly back to the 170, or what's your opinion on that?
Honestly, I think the 250 is going to be under huge pressure. I think the derogation itself is going to be under huge pressure. The derogation is very important to Ireland. I think about 2/3 of dairy cows now are on derogation farms, or farms that avail of the derogation. But other countries are looking at us. The Commission are looking at us and saying, like, there was an article there in one of the papers recently that talked about industrial scale farming in Ireland and so on, and we can say what we want, but that's been circulated around Europe. And people's impression is that Ireland has expanded hugely since the past 4 years. Obviously, there was pent-up demand. I've been involved in 3 or 4 different derogation reviews in different capacities, and this is going to be the hardest one that we're facing into. Whatever figure, first of all, it has to be agreed in Ireland that we're going to apply for derogation, and then we have to go to the Commission and try and get agreement. And whether that'll be at 220, 230, 250, I don't know, Eddie. But I do know this will be the most difficult review we have ever faced into, because water quality has been declining for the past 4 years, 4 or 5 years. We have downward trends in water quality. And that's what the derogation is based on. The fact that you shouldn't have a negative impact on water quality through high stocking rates. And how are we going to defend that? So we have a major issue facing us.
Question for you, Michael. Given the longevity issues with plantain, has any research been done on oversowing it?
No, most of the research on plantain is direct preceding, and I suppose, you know, I would say that's probably where it will stay for the moment. I had last year, mid-year last year, we had one of the leading guys from New Zealand over on plantain, and he has done the most extensive work on plantain in New Zealand. And you know, we peppered him with questions here out on out in the paddocks here about it, and his view for us, the way we graze is 2 years. 2 years is the longest to last. But look, Brendan has it over. We're going to see what happens. But like, I think to be honest with you, Eddie, the message is getting lost a small bit with multi-species when clover to us and the work. If you look at the extensive work that's done in the last 10 years here, clover is the one where we need to get good at, and history has shown us that we haven't been good at it through a variety of reasons, and that's the one we need to focus on. And I think we're muddying the waters a small bit by bringing in other species. We need to get good at this, and I think that should be the focus. That should be our preliminary focus. I'm not saying the other species have no role to answer, or that's where our role should be.
Question running on from the clover one, then Michael, when you're commenting that, question came in, 23% white clover suggested as the max or required mix in a grass sward to limit the nitrogen use to 150 kilos per hectare. Is this realistic and practical, and will white clover stand nitrogen applications of this level to compete, or will it have to be reduced further, or will it require more regular reseeding?
We're going into our 8th year now with those swards in Moorepark, and no reduction.
No reduction. And that's at 150 kilos and
150 kilos. 150 kilos. We didn't have close to 250 kilos in Moorepark. There was a reduction in the 250 kilos in Clonic, but there was a couple of other reasons for that reduction. But for us, to be honest with you, maintaining clover in the sward is more about what you do in grazing than anything else.
The last question just has come in there. I think it's more of it's a question, but I think it's a quick comment for me. With outside grazing blocks, can we put little or no nitrogen in them, but apply to the milking block instead? I think I'll let Jack answer that, because it kind of.
Well, Eddie, I tell you, this is a good point that that person is raising, because it's another area we should be looking at. Like, how many people are drawn in grass and having really high grazing or stocking rates on the grazing platform? And the pressure that's been put on there is phenomenal, and the amount of soil and water being spread on relatively small areas. Like, what is actually happening? I remember at Moorepark there 2 years ago, they were talking about avoiding systems drift. Like, are people doing things now that aren't paying? They're chasing the last cow, and is it the last cow that's actually causing the problem? So it's up to each farmer to manage. Like, I mean, what will be proposed. There's going to be an open consultation on the nitrates review, and not to preempt any of that, but things like, say, a fertilizer register are being considered, so that when you go in to buy fertilizer, you'd have to provide your herd number, so the department knows exactly what's going on. Because every farm will be different, every soil type will be different, and those farmers that are using excess nitrogen are ruining it for everybody else. Similar to farmers that are spreading slurry on a wet day and it's been lost to a watercourse. They're ruining it for everybody else. Slurry management, just when I say it, is so important. I don't think we have enough slurry storage capacity in the country. Once we get to 12th of January, there's a huge rush to spread it. It's being spread because there isn't the storage, not because people want to spread it, but they want to get it out in case the weather changes.
A question in for, I suppose, Elodie there. Leading back to your presentation, Elodie, on the MOST model. You can see it's going to be very beneficial, especially with the changes that are coming down the line as regards farmers could see they could save nitrogen mid-season. So how much more work do you think you have to put into it to get it perfect, or to get measuring clover in it, or have you much more work to get over the line? Like,
to get the clover inside is going to be a good new job, in fairness. Because clover has a very different dynamic, and you need to be able to predict how much nitrogen clover is fixing, and that's a fairly new things to do. There isn't that many models outside which do that, so we will have a good bit of work to do on that. After, the model, in fairness, is not that bad to predict already farm with clover, even though it's just grass growth. Like, we're not that, the error is not that big, so maybe we're already good enough there for farm prediction, not for research, but for farm prediction. I think the model is already good enough for that.
Perfect. Another one there, a question, have Teagasc any ongoing planned grazing trials with zero chemical nitrogen inputs, given the farm to fork targets to increase organic farming across the EU?
With zero, we have some plot work with zero nitrogen. We've zero nitrogen in our grass growth study for the last, I think it's the last 12 years. Yeah. So we have that on zero nitrogen. As regards grazing, we don't have an organic unit at the moment. Whether that changes in the future is probably up for discussion.
And
we have
was, how do high stocking rates work with clover when land around the parlour is not available? That's probably a bit back to what you were commenting a few minutes ago on about the nitrogen anyway, I'd say, on the platform. A few more questions that came in. One actually from Harold, you mentioned him earlier, Jack. How come the department is focusing on very expensive less equipment, needing bigger tractors have been prioritised over using protected urea? Yes.
I suppose the department hasn't forced anyone to apply for less equipment. Like, there's a contractor out there that's probably close to you that's buying the equipment, and you might be better off when you think about your time spent managing the grass and get your man or woman with the trail and shoe in, or the dribble bar. That's the way I look at that one. The department has granted about I think it's nearly 2,500 of these, and a third of slurry next year will be applied with low emission equipment, which will have an impact on the ammonia inventory. The protected fertiliser, protected urea is there, and it's open for farmers to use it. I wouldn't get lost in the argument about the type of fertiliser. My message would be reduce fertiliser, reduce the amount of nitrogen. So whether you're using protected urea, compounds, reduce the amount of fertiliser you're using. There has been a lot more use of protected urea this year. And it's out there, it's for sale, and people are using it. But overall, still the message is get the soil fertility right, get your lime right, and reduce the amount of fertiliser that you're using.
Question there came in at the very start actually on red clover. Have you any research going on grazing? Michael, you mentioned the Fergal variety, I think, in your presentation, but have you any more research going on grazing red clover at the moment?
We have, yeah, we have. But the thing about red clover is, you know, up to last year we had no Irish bred red clover variety ever. So like a lot of them have been come from the continent, and I suppose. We've waited, and I suppose whether we're right or not, we've waited until we've got that variety in, and we've got some clover, red clover work on at the moment, and we'll probably do some clover conservation work, red clover conservation work next year. We'll start that next year when we get the call further.
Another question just came in there again. How realistic is it to get clover planted on cold wetland?
Some of the wetland, heavy land farms in the Kerry Co-op region, the heavy soil program, have started overseeding clover with pretty good success. But in the past, in a Kilmaley type soil, which is really heavy rainfall, peaty type of soil, clover struggled to work in those scenarios in that type of soil. So. If you go to some of the other countries that have heavy soils and you let's say a compressed grass growing season, you've got clover establishment fairly successfully. But you know, obviously there's more work to be done in this area for us. You know.
I think we'll call it a halt soon enough. I think we have had a good few questions and answers come in there. I just checked to make sure there's no questions missed out on there. But I think there's been a very good presentation from our three speakers, and I think we've got a lot of information out of it. I think the take-home message has to be get clover out in pasture. Jack is telling us reduce the bag of nitrogen per farm per acre next year. Elodie is saying if we keep our grass figures and data up to date, we'll be able to, the model will work well on farm. There's no point she can't work unless the data is up to date as regards grass covers or fertiliser. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of information to be got there from the three presentations, and I'd like to thank them. And I might hand back to Anne-Marie to close it up on behalf of the ASA. Thanks.
That's great, Eddie. Thank you very much. And a sincere thanks to all our panellists, to Mick, Elodie, Jack and Eddie for chairing. I'd like to sincerely thank you. It's great to see the science in operation and also the passion in operation that's evident from all, that everybody is in this for the mutual and common good of the industry, with lots to achieve and lots already done, and a sincere thanks to them. Thank you to the viewers for attending in such high numbers and for maintaining. I'm mindful we went over time, but we had lots of questions, which is great, and we thank you for that. We've had a lot of questions about the availability of slides, so just to let people know, this webinar was recorded, so over the coming days the recording will be available on the ASA website in addition to the slides, and if there are some questions there that we didn't get to, we certainly can come back to people if you have any further queries. On behalf of the ASA, I would like to sincerely thank you all, to thank Barbara at office for keeping the technology right, I'd encourage everybody to please do visit the ASA website. We've lots of exciting events coming up. We've our new ASA podcast series, Experts in Their Field, which is a monthly podcast, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback on all of our initiatives. And as always, we welcome new members. So if there is anybody there who would like to join the ASA, we very much welcome you and welcome your suggestions. So from Kilkenny, have a lovely day. Thank you to all, and we'll pick up with everybody soon.